I would like to say thank you. I knew I would the moment I saw him. Sasha said, I'm going to take you to places you've never been before. And on St. Patrick's Day, you have no idea where he and I went. I want to thank you for probably one of the greatest days I ever had. Needless to say, I know a little bit more about Tampa and Ybor City and James Joyce's pub. Yes, thank you. I want to thank Ed Benedict. The moment I asked him to drive somebody somewhere for their doctor appointment, immediately responded. I just want to thank you for that, because that's what we're about. That's all what we're about. Yes, thank you. That's all what we're about. And as I say, please keep in your thoughts, Ron Phillips, he's ill. He said, oh, it's just a bad cold. But he's ill. And when he's not here, well, I think we should remember him and wish him well. And I'm sure you do. Anybody else as well. Now, there is a familiar story of a man who was a worrier. Showed his face and his posture. You know, when people worry, they're, He seemed to carry the weight of the world on his shoulders. However, one day he changed. He had a bounce to his step. He didn't have a care in the world. And a friend asked him, what happened? Well, as you know, I've always been one to worry. I decided it's unwise and unhealthy to do that. So I hired somebody to do the worrying for me. Well, how much does that cost you? Oh, about $1,000 a week, he replied. How can you afford to pay this other person to worry for you, said his astonished friend. And he answered, well, that's his worry. I wish it was that easy to get rid of our worries, don't you? In the Peanuts cartoon, you know, Charles Schultz was a Presbyterian minister. Well, he has a lot of these really good stories in his characters. I'm sure you know who they are, and you probably grew up with them. Charlie Brown is talking to Linus, and Linus is saying, when I hear the coyotes howling at night, it totally depresses me. I feel lonely and I feel scared. And Charlie Brown says, but Linus, I thought holding on to the blanket made you secure. And Linus replied, I think the warranty has run out. I think that's the problem with most security blankets, don't you? The warranty runs out. And then there's Emma Bombeck talking about this little guy named Henry. Henry worried about going to school, and he expressed his anxiety. My name is Henry. I don't know anything. I have some new underwear. I have a loose tooth. I didn't sleep last night because I'm worried. What if the bell rings and a man yells at me, where do you belong? And I don't know. What if the trays in the cafeteria are too tall for me to reach? What if my loose tooth comes out? When we have our heads down, it's supposed to be quiet. Am I supposed to bleed quietly? What if I splash water on my name tag and my name disappears and nobody knows who I am? Poor Henry. Poor us. Worry about the big things and little. Worry about the future. Worry about the past. Worry about our family. It's for people like Linus and Henry, you and me, that somebody spoke these words. Therefore, I tell you, don't worry about your life, what you will eat or what you'll drink, about your body or what you will wear. Is not life more important than food? And the body more important than clothes? Look at the birds in the air. They don't sow or reap or store away in barns, yet we feed them. Are you not much more valuable than they? Who of you can add a single hour to his or her life? And why do you worry about clothes? Look at the lilies of the field. They don't labor or spin. And yet I tell you that even Solomon, in all of his splendor, was dressed like one of these, wasn't dressed as well. If that is how they dot the grass in the field, which is here today and gone tomorrow, thrown into fire, will you not have clothes? You have little faith. So don't worry. Don't ask, what shall we eat, or what shall we drink, or what shall we wear? For those without faith run after these things. For those without faith run after all these kinds of things, seeking first peace with justice, and all these things then will be given unto you. Therefore, don't worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about itself. Each day has trouble of its own. All the problems you had last year, this date, April 16, 2022, all those problems are gone. You now have new ones. And these are going to be gone April 16, 2024. So think for today. My guess is there's somebody in this room who needs to heed those words. You're literally worrying yourself sick over some situation which you have no control. You need desperately to stop for a moment and consider the birds in the air and the lilies of the field and turn your worries into happiness. And I'm not even going to ask, who's the worrier here? I'm not even going to ask that. Because most of us are. You see, worry is a needless burden. It keeps us from being all we were meant to be. That's the conclusion of a well-known author, Dr. Eric Butterworth. If you have a real problem, it's burden enough, weighing yourself down. Then you do it more with some other things as well. If you were already ill, Dr. Butterworth says, you would take something that would further upset you, eat out the lining of your stomach, give you a headache, or make you tense and irritable. Of course not. Of course you wouldn't do that. Yet that's what we do when we have a problem, and we treat it with worry. We simply add another burden. So how do we rid ourselves of the demon? The demon called worry. How can we lighten our load this day? First of all, we need to understand that worry is not based so much on an outer circumstance as on an inner condition. And would you understand that? Worry comes not so much from what is happening to us on the outside as much as it comes from how we process it on the inside. I mean, you don't need to raise your hand, but is there anyone in this room that's hungry? Because they brought the coffee stuff over here. After church, I'm all worked up. I can't wait to get over that. Just so you know. And they never disappoint. It's always like goodies. It's always, well, anybody here gonna go hungry tomorrow? No. Anyone at risk of being thrown out of your home? Probably not. See, the people back in the day had real concerns about survival. There were no government programs to serve as a safety net. They lost their job. Well, they really could starve, and many did. They could lose everything. Most of us live lives that are much more secure than that. Most of us have more than other people in other countries could only dream of, but we don't see it. Now, that's not to minimize that people have real problems. People face real problems every day. And worry reflects the condition of our souls more than the circumstance. I mean, I can't tell you the many people that I met. I had a dear friend in another church. I haven't talked to her in a little while, but if she had a bad hair day, that's a real crisis. And a cause of deep personal anguish. I kept saying to her, I wish I had hair, For other people, diagnosis of cancer can be dealt with confidently with faith. It depends on what you have on the inside more than what's confronting you on the outside. And I was thinking about that this week. Let me take you back to 50 years ago. The New York Mets were in the World Series. Yogi Berra was the manager. And they fought the Oakland Athletics. Now, later, I became friends with Yogi Berra, and he told me all about that series. Well, Tug McGraw was in that series. He was a pitcher. And he's known as the father of the country star Tim McGraw, who was in The Blind Side with Sandra Bullock. There you go. But old-timers like me remember when Tug McGraw was that relief pitcher for the New York Mets. And he coined the phrase, "You gotta believe." I'll never forget it. As they were, working their way up, I was thrilled. I couldn't believe it. The Mets were in the World Series against the Oakland Athletics. And he also was a renowned star reliever, and he pitched the final strike for the world champion Philadelphia Phillies in 1980. It was their only World Series victory in team history. McGraw was successful in his frozen snowball theory of pitching. And he explained it like this. He said, well, if I come in to pitch and the bases are loaded, and the heavy hitter Willie Stargell is coming up to bat, there's no reason I want to throw the ball. I want to run away, right? But eventually I have to pitch. So I remind myself that in a few billion years, the Earth will become a frozen snowball hurling through space, and nobody's going to care what Willie Stargell did with the bases loaded. So do you hear what he's saying? Some people in the same situation would freeze up. They would put pressure on themselves. They would add to the burden of worry to the task at hand, pitching to an all-star hitter. Now, I remember Willie Stargell. I remember when they won. We are family. 1979. Oh, that was magnificent, right? The outward circumstance might be the same, but the inward one is very different on how some people face their difficulties. Who among us today would raise your hand and say, I have absolutely no difficulties, I have no problems, everything for me is absolutely perfect, I have no issues negative? Now, see? Then there are those of us that have some, right? Worry is not based so much on outer circumstance as inner condition. You may not be able, who said that? Oh, today somebody said to me, things don't happen to you, things happen for you. I like that. I just threw that in. Why do you think I talked to you before church? Oh, well, anyway. We may not be able to understand the outward circumstance, but we do know how we could respond to it. And some of you have had some really tough things happen to you. And I marvel at how you deal with it. I really do. I'll ask Fran. Fran, don't I look strong?
Oh, absolutely.
I want you to know, I am the weakest person in the house. I would fold like a cheap suit because I see some of you, I don't know where you get the strength. I want some of it, and I think it's a great way to be. One way to do that is to determine to live in the present. Therefore, don't worry about tomorrow. Tomorrow is going to worry about itself. Each day has its own troubles. And that might sound negative. Each day has its own troubles. It's good advice, though. You and I are not divine. We don't know the future. I remember I said, future isn't what it used to be, right? We may be worrying about something that'll never happen. And that is the saddest thing of all. Something that will resolve itself. We need to focus on today, And years back, a psychologist named Richard Carlson wrote a best-selling book titled, Don't Sweat the Small Stuff. Oddly enough, Carlson died of a heart attack at the age of 45. He got the idea of this book one day. He was driving his 6-year-old daughter to school, and they got caught in rush hour, and they spent 40 minutes creeping along the highway. And as they were in the car, his daughter looked out and said, Daddy, why are all the people mad? Well, her statement caused him to look at all the people stuck there in traffic. Well, they did have a grim, anxious look on their face. He knew they probably weren't mad, but they sure didn't look happy. And it caused him to reflect on the causes of their unhappiness. Perhaps they were reviewing where they needed to be and what they needed to do once they got there. I've done that. There's nothing like being in traffic. Your blood pressure goes up. You're stuck. One time I got stuck, and this is a true story, in the Lincoln Tunnel, right in the middle of the Lincoln Tunnel. I thought this was it. It's over. And we were there for about an hour and 15 minutes, sitting. And I said, how in the world? I was going to leave the car. And I had people in the car. Right? It's true. Well, maybe they were thinking they had to pick up their kids, they had errands to run, they had dinners to make, they had work that they brought home they had to do, or maybe being stuck in traffic gave them a chance to think, what are they anxious about? Their families, their work, their health, who knows? The result was that they looked mad. So he wrote in the book, don't sweat the small stuff, for he was convinced that most of the things we worry about are not worth worrying about in the first place at all. And you're born, big stuff. You die, big stuff. Everything in between, small stuff. His book was actually, Don't Sweat the Small Stuff, and it's all small stuff. Maybe life's not quite that simple. Still, one of the secrets of a fulfilled life is to focus on today. Do you have enough to live on at the moment? Are your children well at the moment? Well, then be thankful and try not to anticipate what might never occur. Live in the present. You know, like I just read the Serenity Prayer. Another way to defeat worry is to always, this is a little harder, always do the right thing if you can. Don't worry. Don't worry about what shall we eat, what shall we drink, what shall we wear. For the faithless run after all these things. Remember your priorities, and all these things will be given to you as well. How many people here, and this you can raise your hand, how many people here think that most people can be trusted? Oh, that's more than I thought. How many people here think that people have proven themselves to be untrustworthy? Yeah, in general, like, do you trust everybody? Oh, there you go. I'm in that camp. But I don't like to be in that camp. I like to be trusting. Anyway. Remember, all these things will be given to you as know what's important. It's a key factor for defeating worry. And many people worry out of a sense of guilt. Sometimes back there was an article I read about a man 80 years ago when he was a little boy. He planted a firecracker on a railroad track 80 years ago. And that was in 1926. And he ran off when he was spotted by a railway policeman. And ever since, he confesses he was tormented with guilt. the feelings. He claims it was the only bad thing he ever did. So he decided to turn himself in. He went to the police station and confessed. And, can you imagine the police looking at, when did you do this? 1926. They said, well, we don't have any file on that. Nobody reported it. He wanted to know what his punishment would be. Can you believe it? And, you're past the statute of limitations, they said, and you won't be facing charges. But they did warn him, don't do that ever again. I don't know, he might have been 90-something at that point. Well, his conscience perhaps was a little too well developed. There's a lot of people who torment themselves. I know they torment themselves over something they did in the past that was wrong. Maybe they fear exposure. Maybe they fear the consequences of their actions. Maybe it's just the knowledge that what they did was wrong. Still, it robs them of peace of mind. And one way we can defeat worry is always try to do the right thing. We're not going to succeed at that. At least I'm not. Focus on today, though, and live with morals and live with ethics. Not much to ask. And finally, trust in who loves you. Listen to the words. And why do you worry about clothes? See how the lilies of the field grow. They don't labor or spin, yet I tell you, not even Solomon in all of his splendor was dressed like one of these. If that's how nature clothes the lilies of the field, today and tomorrow is thrown in the fire, won't you be more clothed, O you of little faith? Well, what's being referred to? Any plant that is both lovely and will grow on its own without cultivation. Since wood was scarce in Palestine, these wild flowers were sometimes used for fire. Look at how nature cares even for the wild flowers, which eventually end up in the furnace. How much more will you be cared for, you of little faith? And I think that's the heart of the problem, our lack of faith. It is hard to live. I know it is. I'm in it with you. I want to pay my bills. I want to have fun. I want to do the right thing. I want to take away all of this heavy burden of responsibility. But I can't. And we really don't know how much we really are loved. That's why we worry about the future. While we held on to the mistakes of the past. I was talking to a woman one time. She was afraid to die. I said, why are you afraid to die? She said, because I'm afraid nobody will come and put flowers on my grave. Really? Well, look at the words of Isaiah. I've been forsaken and forgotten. And then he said, can a mother forget the baby at her breast and have no compassion on the child that she has born? You will never be forgotten. Even if your own mother might forget or forsake you, you will never be unloved. Can you even imagine greater love than a mother for her child? And yet the good news today is that you are loved even greater than that. So this secular message is for us today. Don't worry. Be happy. Live in the present. Always try to do the right thing. Be the best Unitarian Universalist you can be. And as Tuck McGraw says, you gotta believe. Amen.